Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Prapta Sakalyana Gurana Vasya Bande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Prapta Sakalyana Gurana Vasya Bande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Bande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Bande Gurashi Charana Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanima Niramajanado Shri Vigrahara Dana Shingaratanima Niramajanado Juktasya Bhaktamsa Neyunjatapi Bande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Neyunjatapi Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Satana Truptan Hari Bhakta Shanga Chaturvidashi Bhagavat Prasada Satana Truptan Kritvaiva Trupti Vajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Bhajata Shadeva Shiradikama Tabayara Para Madhura Lila Gunarupa Namna Shiradikama Madhura Lila Pratikshana Danalalupasya Bande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Ne kunjayuno Rati Kelisidhai Jayali Vir Jukti Apekshaniya Nikunjayuno Ratikelisiddhai Jayali Viryukti Tatrati Dakshar Ativalavasya Bande Gurashi Charana Vrindam Ativarabhasya Sakchadharidena Shamastashrashi Ruktastathava Vyataiva Sadhavi Kintu Prabhoja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrinda Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya prasadam nagati kutapi Yasya prasadam Yasya prasadam Dayam stuvam tasya Yasatri sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrinda Dayam stuvam tasya Yasatri sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrinda Yasatri sandhyam Vande Guru Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatari Shatarine Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatari Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Gaur Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Yaraya Namah, Krishna Jadavaya Namah, Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinam Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hare Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Vataragunata, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe. Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadrama Jayo Sudarshan Chakra. Jayo Sitaram Jayo Sitaram Sitaram Jayo Lakshman Hanuman. Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Pramanande Hari Hari Haribo Jai Vishwapar Paramansa Prabhaja Kachara Sutara Sarashishima. His Divine Grace Abhacharvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Pratishta Viviti Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Siromani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Gaurya Guru Varga Patitu Dhara Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatra Gunata Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Gunasat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai. Ananta Kuti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Se Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai. Jai Param Dayal Se Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai. Jai Pramanama Sankirtane Ka Janaka Prima Purushottama Shri Sachinandana Shriman Gauranga Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaur Hari Mahaprana Avatar Ki Jai. Golokera Pramadhana Harinam Sankitan Jaga Ki Jai. Yoga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai. Brihadanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopina Radha Kund Syamakund Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Brajabhum Vrindavan Mathurdham Ki Jai. The Lordship Shri Shri Radhanjala Madhava Ki Jai. Shri Shri Maya Purnavadip Eka Chakradham Ki Jai. Parama Karuna Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. Shri Purushottam Ketra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smaspadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai. Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Karni Shingare Bhagavan Ki Jai. Shri Ganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Mathura Dharani Ki Jai. Shamaveta Bhakta Vindi Ki Jai. Nitai Gaurari Pramanande Haribo. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glories, glories, Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga.
Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha Yato Yato Yami Tato Narsimha Bahe Narsimha Hridaye Narsimha Narasimha Madhim Sharanam Prapade तव कर कमलवरे नाकाम् अद्भुत शृङ्गाम् दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गाम् केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय प्रहलाद महाराज
प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सत्या विष्णु भक्ति प्राणे देवी सत्वताय राधे तुलसी महारानी वृंदादेवी की जय।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो
जितो मारा शरण लो तारा वंचा पूरा न हो
जे तुम्हारा शरण तारा वंश पूर्ण
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन बासी
तुम्हें कृपा करे करो तारे वृंदावनवासी।
मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास
मोराए विलास कुंज दियोवास।
नयने हरि वो सदा जुगल रूपरासी निवेदाना धारो साखीर अनुगाता कोरो सेवा अधिकारा दिए कोरो निज दासी दीना कृष्ण दासे कोए ये न मोरा होए श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये न भासी श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये न भासी यानि कानि च पापानि भ्रमा च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki
Jai. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai, Priyaya Kesava Satya, Vishnu Bhakti Pradevi Sattvatai. Vrindai Tulasi Devai, Priyaya Kesava Satya, Vishnu Bhakti Pradevi Sattvatai. Vrindai Tulasi Devai, Priyaya Kesava Satya, Vishnu Bhakti Pradevi Sattvatai. Keshmati Tulasi Maharani, Vrinda Devi ki. Oh Tulasi, Lord Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire is to attend the service of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you, his wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence, Pleasure Grove, Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pass them to Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower for redemption of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your ornamented servant. Is ready, fallen, and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always sing the love of Shri Radha, Govind, Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani, Brinda Devi Ki Jai. Jai Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai. Chetu Darpana Mahajana Mabhada Nivapana Shri Hatari Chandika Charanam Vidya Badu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pradipadam Purnamrita Swadanam Sarvatmasnam Parampara Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Shmarane Nakala Ita Drishitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaiva Midrishamiyajani Nanuraga Trinadapi Sunichaina Tarorapi Saishnuna Amani Namanadina Kirtaniya Sadari Nadhanam Nadhanam Nasundarim Kavitamba Jagadisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmanishwari Bhavata Bhakti Raitu Kitvai Vainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Paritama Vishame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaju Stitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galora Shrudharaya Vadanam Gadugadarudaya Gira Pulakarin Shitam Bapukada Tavanama Grahani Bhavishati Juga Itam Nimishenam Chakshusha Pravisha Itam Shunya Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Aslishava Padaratam Pinashtumam Adarshanam Marmahatam Karotuva Jatatathava Vidadhatulam Pato Matpranatastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikshastakam Ki Jai Jai Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gaura Tvishe. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses your heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord and stroll in the street, one should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer our respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I am fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up and will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he hinders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Kam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1, to blaspheme. The devotees who dedicate their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2, to consider names of demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4, to blaspheme the Vedic literatures or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5, to consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6, to give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7, to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. 8, to consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which offer in Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9, to instruct the Lord's holy name. 10, do not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy names, and to maintain material attachment, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let's talk about most humble blessings and for all the Vaishnavas, the Lord. They are just like desire trees, like feel the desires for everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls.
Vanchakalpatarabhyascha Vasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai. Bol Premanandi Haribo. Shri Guru Pranama Prayers Ki Jai. Om Adanya Timras Sya Yana Jana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manubhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Pandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapachikamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nivitam Sha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Namo no Svaraya Krishna Prastaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamini Shiva Subhanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhane Namaha Madhurujvali Pramedya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gorakishoraya Shakshadvairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambhude Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Minodaya Sachitanandanamine Gorashakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Goravir Bhava Bhumistvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Savabhoma Sri Jagannatayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patita Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Tuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Surator Pangur Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madanam Gohano Divyad Vindaranya Kalpa Drumadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki dear. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam Chintamani Prakarasat Mastakalpa Vriksha Laksha Vritesu Surabhira Vipaliantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kvanantam Aravinda Dalayataksam Barhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gedam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Niyata Prakasam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sadurlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satamritsara Sampragamyo Vayo Ratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yad Prapadasim Yavichinti Tatve Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekop Yasora Chayatam Jagananda Koti Yash Chakti Rasti Jagananda Chayayadanta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Chayanta Rastam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Marajasta Taiva Sampropya Rupya Mahima Sanayana Bhusaha Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitastuvanti Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Pratibhavitabis Tabirya Eva Nicharupa Taya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhuto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadeva Hidayesu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Amenatistan Nana Avataram Akarod Bhuvanesa Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumam Yo Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanda Koti Koti Svasesha Vasadadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Ashusateda Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Yasya Jagananda Satani Sute Trigun Yatad Vishaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sadva Vulambi Parasatvam Visuddha Satvam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu Ya Praninam Patifalam Smaratam Upetya Lila Yatena Bhuvanani Jaya Jasram Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijadamni Tale Chatasya Devi Mahesh Sutesu Haridama Sutesu Tesu Te Te Prabhava Nichaya Vihitaschayena Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shristi Stati Pralayasada Vasaktireka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichanurupam Apiyasya Chachesta Tesa Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Vishesha Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasambutam Apitata Samapaiti Karya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Deeparchadeva Hita Santanam Abhyupetya Deepayate Rivita Hetu Samanu Dharma Yastadvegeva Jija Vishnu Taya Vibhati Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narna Vajale Bhajati Sma Yoga Nidram Ananta Jagananda Saroma Kupaha Adhara Saktim Avalambya Param Swamurtim Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasita Kalamatavalamya Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jagananda Nata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalaviseso Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Basmanya Tasma Sakalesu Nijesu Tejas Viyam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitad Vadatra Brahmaya Esa Jagananda Vidanu Karta Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palavu Yugam Vinidaya Kumbha Dvande Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vihantam Alamasya Jagatrayasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahika Ganamambu Maruti Sascha Kalas Tatatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savita Sakalagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Tejaha Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nichaya Sutayasta Pamsi Brahma Dikita Patagava Dayasta Jivaha Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrindra Gopra Matavendra Mahosva Karma Pandanu Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdahati Kintu Chabakti Bhajam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Kroda Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Bitti Vatsalya Moha Guru Gora Vasevya Bhavai Sanchintya Tasya Sadrisemtana Mahapurat Prete Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shriyakanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Drumabu Mischintamani Ganamaito Amritam Kata Ganam Natyam Gamanam Apivansi Priyasaki Chirandam Jyoti Param Apita Aswadya Apicha Sayatra Shiradi Bihishavati Shirabi Byascha Sumahan Nime Sardakyuva Rajatina Hiyatrapi Samaya Bhaje Svita Dvitam Tamaham Iha Golakamitiam Vidantaste Santakshati Viralachara Katipaya Ishvara Paramakrishna Sachitananda Vigraha Nadiradi Govinda Sarvakanana Karanam Shri Brahmasamita Kijay Shri Guru Vastika Pirs Kijay. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy. Just as a cloud pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it, so the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master is an ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind, sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress their deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. Spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana. I offer my most humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he's the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I should always remember. But Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Canto 2, Chapter 10, verse number 47. Parimanam chakalasya kalpalakshana vigraham yata purastad vyakyayasye padmam kalpam ato shrinu. Translation, word for word. Parimanam, measurement. Cha, also. Kalasya, of time. Kalpa, a day of Brahma. Lakshana, symptoms. Vigraham, form. Yata, as much as. Purastat, hereafter. Vyakyasye, shall be explained. Padmam, by the name Padma. Kalpam, the duration of the day. Ato, thus. Shrinu, just here. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O King, I shall in due course explain the measurement of time in its gross and subtle features, with the specific symptoms of each. But for the present, let me explain unto you the Padma Kalpa. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The present duration of a kalpa of Brahma is called the Varaha Kalpa, or Sweta Varaha Kalpa, because the incarnation of the Lord as Varaha took place during the creation of Brahma, who was born on the lotus coming out of the abdomen of Vishnu. Therefore, this Varaha Kalpa is also called Padma Kalpa, and this is testified by acharyas like Jiva Goswami, as well as Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura, in pursuance of the first commentator, Swami Sridhara. So there is no contradiction between the Varaha and the Padma Kalpa of Brahma. Text 48. Sonaka uvacha yad aha no bhavan sutta shata bhagavatottamaha chakara tirtani bhuvas tyakva bandhun sudustyajan. Sonaka uvacha. She, Sonaka Muni, said, Yat, as, aha, you said, na, unto us, bhavan, your good self, sutta, O sutta, sata, vidura, bhagavata uttama, one of the topmost devotees of the Lord, chara, practice, tirtani, places of pilgrimage, bhuva, on the earth, tyakva, leaving aside, bandhun, all relatives, sudustyajan, very difficult to give up. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Sonaka Rishi, after hearing all about the creation, inquired from Sutta Goswami about Vidura, for Sutta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives, who were very difficult to leave. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The rishis, headed by Sonaka, were more anxious to know about Vidura, who met Maitreya Rishi while traveling to the pilgrimage sites of the world. Text 49 and 50. Satu ko saraves tasya samvado dhyatma samsrita yadva sa bhagavam stasmai pristas tatvam uvachaha bruhinas tadidam somya vidurasya vichestitam bandhutyaga nimittam cha yataiva gatavan punah. Satu, of Vidura, Kosarave, as that of Maitreya, Tasya, there, Sambada, news, Adhyatma, in the matter of transcendental knowledge, Samsrita, full of, Yat, which, Va, anything else, Sa, he, Bhagavan, his grace, Tasmai, unto him, Prista, inquired, Tatvam, the truth, Uvacha, answered, Ha, in the past, Bruhi, please tell, Na, unto us, Tat, those matters, Idam, here, Somya, O gentle one, Vidurasya, of Vidura, Vichestitam, activities, Bandhu Tyaga, renouncing the friends, Nimitam, the cause of, Cha, also, Yata, as, Eva, also, Agatavan, came back, Puna, again, at home. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Sonaka Rishi said, let us know, please, what topics were discussed between Vidura and Maitreya, who talked on transcendental subjects, and what was inquired by Vidura and replied by Maitreya. Also, please let us know the reason for Vidura's giving up the connection of his family members and why he again came home. Please also let us know the activities of Vidura while he was in the places of pilgrimage. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sri Sutta Goswami was narrating the topics of the creation and destruction of the material world, but it appears that the rishis, headed by Sonaka, were more inclined to hear of transcendental subjects which are on a higher level than the physical. There are two classes of men, namely, those too addicted to the gross body and the material world, and others on the higher level who are interested more in transcendental knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam gives facility to everyone, both to the materialist and to the transcendentalist. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the matter of the Lord's glorious activities, both in the material world and in the transcendental world, men can derive equal benefit. The materialists are more interested in the physical laws and how they are acting, and they see wonders in those physical glamours. Sometimes, due to physical glamours, they forget the glories of the Lord. They should know definitely that physical activities and their wonders are all initiated by the Lord. The rose in the garden gradually takes its shape and color to become beautiful and sweet, not by a blind physical law, although it appears like that. Behind that physical law is the direction of the complete consciousness of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, things cannot take shape so systematically. The artist draws a picture of a rose very nicely with all attention and artistic sense, and yet it does not become as perfect as the real rose. If that is the real fact, how can we say that the real rose has taken its shape without intelligence behind the beauty? This sort of conclusion is due to a poor fund of knowledge. One must know, from the above description of creation and annihilation, that the Supreme Consciousness, being omnipresent, can take care of everything with perfect attention. That is the fact of the omnipresence of the Supreme Lord. Persons still more foolish than the gross materialists, however, claim to be transcendentalists and claim to have such supreme, all-pervading consciousness, but offer no proof. Such foolish persons cannot know what is going on behind the next wall, yet they are falsely proud of possessing the cosmic, all-pervading consciousness of the Supreme Person. For them also, hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is a great help. It will open their eyes to see that simply by claiming supreme consciousness, one does not become supremely conscious. One has to prove in the physical world that he has such supreme consciousness. The rishis of Naimisharanya, however, were above the gross materialists and the false transcendentalists, and thus they were always anxious to know the real truth in transcendental matters as discussed by authorities. Text 51. Sutta vacha ragya parikshita pristo yad avochan mahamuni tadvo bidasya srinuta rajna prasnanusarataha. Sutta Uvacha. Shri Sutta Goswami replied, Rajga, by the king, Parikshita, by Parikshit, Prista, as asked, Yat, what? Avochat spoke, Mahamuni, the great sage, Tat, that very thing, Va, unto you, Abhidasya, I shall explain, Shrinuta, please hear, Rajna, by the king, Prasna, question, Anusarata, in accordance with. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Shri Sutta Goswami explained, I shall not explain to you the very subjects explained by the great sage in answer to King Parikshit's inquiries. Please hear them attentively. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Any question that is put forward may be answered by quoting the authority, and that satisfies the saner section. That is the system even in the law court. The best lawyer gives evidence from the past judgment of the court without taking much trouble to establish his case. This is called the parampara system, and learned authorities follow it without manufacturing rubbish interpretations. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Brahmasmita 5.1. Let us all obey the Supreme Lord, whose hand is everything, whose hand is in everything, without exception. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the second canto, 10th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so the understanding of the material creation is extremely important if we want to understand the origins of things. Now, modern so-called science is not so concerned about the origin of things, although they say some nonsense things about it, like it started by a big bang or something like that. But or there's chemical evolution. It's actually nonsensical. There's no proof that it's true. However, they are more concerned about what happens after the creation. And why is that? Well, it's mainly because of Darwin, who gave another phony explanation of how different species evolve. Right? So he can't say, and he doesn't know how the original first amoeba appeared. He doesn't even try to answer that question. Right? So, what cannot be explained by Darwinism? This is in the internet. What cannot be explained by Darwinism? Darwinism fails to attribute the reasons for the existence of vestigial organs. Well, it means like the heart and the intestines and all those things. Like vermiform appendix in human beings. These organs should have been eliminated during the progression of evolution because of its no use for a long time. Well, he's talking about the appendix. They say that it is something that's an anomaly because it was produced in the primitive humanoids, but it has no function in the present body. This, of course, is nonsense. The appendix is very important for the health of a person. But even the modern doctors, whenever they get a chance, when the appendix gets a little infected, they'll pull it out. They'll cut it out. Did you ever have your appendix taken out? Did you ever hear?
Not been taken, but I had this, but somehow or the other, we didn't go for the appendectomy.
Did they want it?
But they
The doctors wanted it. No, they do it immediately.
In our family, a member, very close person, for that they did it. Just like got
Yeah, they do it right away.
got pain.
The same with the tonsil also.
Yeah, they immediately remove it.
Yeah.
It's called barium meal.
Yeah, I didn't know, and I had my tonsil taken out. It was horrible. But you should never get your tonsils taken out, because both the appendix and the tonsil have important health function in the body. You see. But because they make these theories up, and they don't see any use of the tonsil or the appendix. They think it's something left over from pre-humanoid men. And they think it's like completely useless. But no, it's not true. The tonsil is very important because when it gets infected, you're forced to stop eating. It's a sign your body is giving you that stop eating. You're eating too much, and the body is full of toxins. Let the body rest, right? So, but once you go on a fast, 3 days or 5 days later, your tonsil is no longer swollen, and you can swallow again. Right? The same thing with the appendix. It gets infected because there's too much junk in the body, right? But if you detox the body by fasting, that also will get healed. But sometimes it's so serious it explodes. That's when you have to maybe take it out, because there's an explosion, because the body is so full of crap that the appendix explodes. So therefore, more people have died by overeating than by undereating. And we see that all the time. And there's an epidemic of obesity in the United States. Right? They're claiming that in another 20 or 30 years, 90% of the people will be fat in the United States because of eating junk food all the time, like pizza. Our pizza is okay, though. Why do I say that? Because we make the dough fresh ourselves. But if you go like into all these pizza company stores, like what do you call it? Domino's, this one and that one, right? Well, there's more technology in the pizza dough than in Microsoft program, right? Now you would say, oh, what do you mean? Well, first of all, they're forced to buy the dough if they're part of a chain of stores. They have to buy the dough from the chain store, because the dough has to be perfect every time, right? So it's technically made, and they put all kinds of junk in it so that it comes out perfect every time. We make our dough by ourselves. We don't buy the ready-made dough. But if you have any of the chain stores that are subcontracting from the original company, whether it's Subway or it's Domino's or any of those stores, they always have to buy from the manufacturer the dough, because it's scientifically made to be perfect every time. So they've put a lot of technology into it, right? A lot of junk things to make it rise in a perfect way. So here it says that the sages assembled in Naimisharanya with the principal sage Sonaka Rishi wanted to hear more transcendental subjects than about creation of the material world, because it's all about materialism, right? So they wanted to hear about Vidura and his question and answers with Maitreya Muni. However, Prabhupada says in the purport to Canto 2, Chapter 10, verse 49 and 50, he says, Srimad Bhagavatam gives facility to everyone, both to the materialist and to the transcendentalist. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the matter of the Lord's glorious activities, both in the material world and in the transcendental world, men can derive equal benefit. It's not that one is less than the other. They're both important in order to understand what our real position is in the material world. This is explained even more in depth in the fifth morning walk of Life Comes from Life. And Prabhupada is accompanied by Dr. Singh, it's Swarup Damodar Maharaj, and Brahmananda Swami. And the title of that first part is called The Invisible Pilot. And Srila Prabhupada says, almost everyone in the world is under the false impression that life is born from matter. Well, who says that? Who says that life is born from matter? Well, if we go again on the internet, and it says, let's see what it says. What is the opposite of creationism? Creationism is everything started by God. Right? So here it says, what is the opposite of creationism? In addition, what cannot, one second. What cannot be explained by evolution? Yeah, because Darwin does not explain how everything started. He doesn't even try. He just starts from there was an original single amoeba, and then it became like this and like that, and then human beings were formed, and so forth. Right? That's Darwinism. But someone has to have an answer about how everything started. So, in addition to complex structures and systems among the phenomena that critics variously claim evolution cannot explain, are consciousness, hominid intelligence, that means human intelligence, instincts, emotions, metamorphosis, that's in changing bodies, photosynthesis, homosexuality, music, language, religion, morality, and altruism. So these are things that are not explained by the materialists. They don't know how these things came about. And on the other hand, which theory fails to explain the origin of life? The theory of evolution, both currently and as first conceived by Darwin and Wallace, neither provides nor requires an explanation for the origin of life. Okay, so these are things that cannot be explained by Darwinism. Okay, so now, how do people explain, or so-called scientists explain, the origin of life? Well, you have the Big Bang. So that is completely material. They don't know where all the matter came from, but they say that there was a Big Bang that took place, and then after that the planets were formed, and then eventually there was some primordial soup, and it got zapped by lightning, and the first amoeba appeared. So this is about the sum and total of their narrative about creation. Let's read a little bit about that. What is the origin of the world according to science? The origins of life cannot be dated as precisely, but there is evidence that bacteria-like organisms lived on Earth 3.5 billion years ago. Do they present the evidence? No. And what do they say? Do they say that organisms were alive? No, they say bacteria-like organisms lived on Earth 3.5 billion years ago. And they may have, this is all speculation. As soon as it says may have, it means we are now speculating, sir. They may have existed even earlier, when the first solid crust formed. So they're saying the Earth, the dust in the space, sort of coagulated and created a crust, which later turned into a planet. Right? This is all after the Big Bang. Right? When the first solid crust formed, almost 4 billion years ago, these early organisms must have been simpler than the organisms living today. This is their explanation. That's it. There's nothing more. Right? And this is not an explanation. It's just speculation, completely speculative. Right? Okay, so they admit that they don't have any explanation for the origin of life. They try to give some explanation of how the world began, but they don't deal with how it began. They say at one point there was a Big Bang. That's it. They don't go beyond that or before that. Okay, so Prabhupada is saying here, almost everyone in the world is under the false impression that life is born from matter. Now we just explained why there's a false impression, because they've never really given a real scientific explanation, like the Bhagavatam, of how the world began. But today they believe that life is born from matter, right? We cannot allow this nonsensical theory to go unchallenged. This is Prabhupada. Life does not come from matter. Matter is generated from life. This is not theory, it is fact. Science is based on an incorrect theory, therefore all its calculations and conclusions are wrong. And people are suffering because of this. That this is the real truth. People are suffering because of all this nonsense, pseudoscience that's being taught as if it is real science. When all these mistaken modern scientific theories are corrected, people will become happy. So we must challenge the scientists and defeat them. That's why Prabhupada started the Bhaktivedanta Institute. Otherwise, they will mislead the entire society. Well, they've already done that. Matter changes in 6 phases: birth, growth, maintenance, production of byproducts, dwindling, and death. But the life within matter, the spirit soul, is eternal. It goes through no such changes. Life appears to be developing and decaying, but actually it is simply passing through each of these 6 phases until the material body can no longer be maintained. Then the old body dies and the soul enters a new body. When our clothing is old and worn, or meaning worn out, we change it. Similarly, one day our bodies become old and useless, and we pass on to a new body. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 2.13, Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara. Yovanam jara tata dehantara prapti. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. And a little later, in the 2nd chapter, 18th verse, Antavanta ime deha nityas yuktaha sarirana. This means that only the material body of a person, only the material body of the indestructible and eternal living entity is subject to destruction. The material body is perishable, but the life within the body, meaning the soul, is nitya, eternal. Everything works on the basis of this living force. This is the Pacific Ocean, and these high waves are being manipulated by living force. This airplane, Srila Prabhupada gestures toward a passing aircraft, is flying, but it is flying But is it flying undirected? Dr. Singh, someone is directing it. Srila Prabhupada, yes, everything is working under someone's direction. Why do the rascal scientists deny this? The airplane is a big machine, but it is flying under the direction of a small spiritual spark, the pilot. Scientists cannot prove that this big 747 airplane could fly without the small spiritual spark. So, as the small spiritual spark can direct a large plane, the big spiritual spark directs the whole cosmic manifestation. So Prabhupada is using very simple but direct logic based on observation and Vedic truths. So let's see what his examples are. He says, first of all, he says, the world is under the false impression that life is born from matter. Yeah, that's the whole, it seems to be like that, but actually it is not like that. Because where did the matter come from? They have no explanation for that. No modern scientific explanation for the origin of the matter other than the Big Bang. But the Big Bang also accepts that there was something before the Big Bang, but matter was existing before the Big Bang. So therefore there's no explanation at all of the origin of the matter, And we know that matter cannot organize itself. You can do that experiment. You put you put all the materials for making a cloth. There's a thimble, there's a needle, and there's thread, right? And just put it on a shelf and see if after, let's say, 1 year or 10 years or 100 years or 1,000,000 years, that needle and thread is going to turn into a shirt. It's not. It's not going to turn into a shirt at all unless some tailor picks it up and starts stitching, you see. So matter cannot organize itself. You can do millions of experiments and everyone will prove that matter cannot organize itself. You have to have the spiritual person there who has a soul to turn matter into something like a shirt or a shoe or a pinball machine or an airplane or a car. It doesn't organize itself. Why can't the scientists understand that? You can prove it. You can do 1,000,000 different experiments with different types of matter that they will never organize themselves. But yet they're saying the whole world started by self-organizing matter. This is nonsense. Prabhupada says, life does not come from matter. Matter is generated from life. This is not theory, it is fact. You see, he's saying this is not a theory, this is a fact. And people like, see, the only explanation they had for the creation of living entities is called abiogenesis. What is abiogenesis? Let's look it up in the dictionary. A-bio, A-B-I-O, Genesis, G-E-N, G-E-N-E-S-I-S or something like that. What's it say? Say it in a microphone. Abiogenesis. That's their only explanation. Go ahead.
The original evolution of life or living organisms from inorganic or inanimate substances.
There it is. Right? That's their explanation. Now, Dr. Louis Pasteur proved that that's not possible. In the 1850s, he proved that that is not possible. And the experiment that he did is absolutely brilliant. What he did was, long ago, people learned how to blow glass, glass, right? You heat it up, and then you have to blow into some kind of a tube, and you can make it into different shapes once the glass has been melted down. So how do they make glass? They make it from sand and other things, but at a very high temperature it becomes glass. Look it up, origin of glass. Make sure I'm not saying something wrong. Where does glass come from? It's something that's manufactured. What's it say?
Glass, as an independent object, dates back about 2500 BC. It originated perhaps in Mesopotamia and was brought
Speak
later.
louder.
So, glass as an independent object dates back to about 2500 BC. It originated perhaps in Mesopotamia and was brought later to Egypt. Vessels of glass appeared about 1450 BC during the reign of Thutmose III, a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt.
Okay, but how does it say it came about? What is it made of? How do you make glass? And by the way, that's also speculative. It's perhaps.
Glass is made from natural and abundant raw materials.
What? Which materials?
Sand, soda ash, and limestone.
See, I told you, they make it out of sand.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I mean, I heard about silica.
Speak into the microphone.
I heard, I remember it as silica, and sand is silica, I think, but I didn't know.
Okay, but how do they make it? They have to heat it up.
Yeah.
At a certain point, it becomes glass, and then they can shape the glass. They have like a long tube, and they blow into it, and they can make shapes out of it. There are companies in Seattle that do this, and you can go. You can learn how to do it yourself also.
They have classes. I remember one of my
classes, how to blow glass and make different shapes. Anyway, Pasteur blew into glass, or he got it made by these experts. This is like 200 years ago almost. And he made these flasks where there's a round part of it, and then it comes up like this, and it makes like a neck that's very thin, and at the end there's a hole. So there's the bowl, and then it thins out and goes like that and down, and I think like this, right? So that because up until his time, most people believe that life comes from matter, right? And they gave the example. They said, look, if you put a piece of meat in the open and leave it, pretty soon maggots will appear. And that's the proof that life, a maggot, comes from matter. And, Pastor said, this is nonsense. It's not a fact. But how can I prove it? So he put a nutrient soup in the bowl part of that flask, right? A nutrient soup. That means, maybe he blended worms or insects or something living and blended it, right? And in water, and he puts it in this flask. And then he boils it, right? And then, the steam comes out, right? And then he plugged the hole where everything comes out, so nothing can go in, right? And he waited to see what would happen. Nothing happened. It just stayed like a liquid. Right? Then he did the same thing again, but this time he didn't plug the hole. And after a while, living entities appeared, little worms or little insects and things like that. So then he understood what was happening, that in the air, the ambient air, there are microbes, all kinds of microbes flying around. We know that. Someone said, oh, you have to wear a mask because, if someone sneezes, it can go 28 feet and you can get the disease, right? So, there is so many things floating around in the air. It's not empty, right? And there's all kinds of bacteria and even anthrax and things like that blowing around, all kinds of toxic things. So that's why you have hair in your nose. You ever ask why you have hair in your nose? Anybody know? Yeah, the hair and the mucus catches those things. So, if you only breathe out of your mouth, you'll get sick. But if you breathe out of your nose, then it'll catch all that dirt and microbes and things like that and protects your lungs. Now, of course, people, when they take a big toke or when they inhale smoke, they're putting directly into their lungs all types of toxic things. That's why smokers, they usually get sick and they die of cancer, right? And it's completely nonsense, smoking. I hope you never do it. Because we're already breathing in nonsense, right? So much factories are spewing out all kinds of toxic things into the air, right? And we're breathing it in. So now what he did, so he understood that you can boil the soup of these dead, insects and different things, worms, whatever you put in there, or human blood or whatever. But if no air can get in, then nothing happens. And if you let the air get in, something happens, right? So he demonstrated this, and he did it in different ways to make sure he wasn't making a mistake. And he proved that abiogenesis is nonsense. Life does not come from dead chemicals. Life comes from life, right? Living bacteria that can touch the meat, and then it produces. Those bacteria have the DNA to produce a worm, right? So then the worm or the maggot comes out of the meat. It's not that the meat created the worm; it's the germs that created the worm, the living germs. So he proved that this abiogenesis is a nonsense theory. This is 1850, right? There's no other explanation that the scientists have. There's no other explanation of how life came about on the earth. So what is Prabhupada saying here? He said, we cannot allow this nonsensical theory to go unchallenged. Life does not come from matter. Matter is generated from life. This is not theory. It is fact. And like I said, you can do 1 million experiments to prove that life does not come from matter. You can put a needle and a thread and let it sit for as long as you want. No shirt is going to happen. You can get everything to make a car. There's like 1,500 or 15,000 parts in a modern car, right? You can put them all in a place and wait, and the car will not be made, right? Matter does not organize itself. You can do 1 million examples or experiments, and every experiment will give you the same outcome, that matter does not organize itself. But yet they're teaching this as science, right? This is like, it's crazy, it's loony, right? And Prabhupada says, matter is generated from life. This is not theory, it is fact. Science is based on an incorrect theory. Therefore, all its calculations and conclusions are wrong, and people are suffering because of this. This is in the Fifth Morning Walk, May 3rd, 1973. And it goes on. He gives many other examples to prove that this theory is wrong. I'll just read one more. He says, another example is, everything works on the basis of this living force, meaning a soul, right? This is, for example, this is the Pacific Ocean, and these high waves are being manipulated by living force. This airplane Srila Prabhupada gestures toward a passing aircraft. It's flying. But it is flying, but is it flying undirected? Dr. Singh, someone is directing it. Srila Prabhupada, yes. Everything is working under someone's direction. Why do the rascal scientists deny this? Everything they do is working under somebody's direction, right? The space station, it didn't make itself from matter. People organized it. A lot, if you look at how many scientists had to work on putting up a space station, it's like thousands of them, right? NASA employs thousands of people. Right? The Russians employ thousands of people to put Sputniks and space stations and rockets and all that stuff into space, right? And to maintain it. So why do the rascal scientists deny this? The airplane is a big machine, but it is flying under the direction of a small spiritual spark. That means the pilot. Scientists cannot prove that this big 747 airplane could fly without the small spiritual spark, without a person, a living person, right? So, as the small spiritual spark, or the living person, can direct a large plane, the big spiritual spark, meaning Krishna or God, directs the whole cosmic manifestation. Okay, this is logic. Right? Okay. So, what time is it now? All right. This was the point I wanted to make. Right. And so, therefore, understanding the Srimad Bhagavatam's explanation of material creation is absolutely important, because it's a real explanation. It's a scientific explanation. The scientists have no explanation for how the world came about and how the different species developed. They have no explanation, no real explanation. How the first amoeba was formed, they have no explanation. Therefore, it's important. That's why Maharaj Parikshit is going to die in 7 days. Why does he want to hear about how the world was created, right? You'd think, well, he should be worried about, how I can stop death, right? But no, he wants to hear all this. He wants to hear all this. It's important. Because then, because why? Why is it important? Because it's this statement that Prabhupada makes. He says, life appears to be developing and decaying, but actually it is simply passing through each of these 6 phases until the material body can no longer be maintained. Then the old body dies and the soul enters a new body. He says, life does not come from matter. Matter is generated from life. This is not theory. It is fact. Science is based on an incorrect theory. Therefore, all its calculations and conclusions are wrong. And people are suffering because of this. That's the point. People are suffering because they're being taught that everything comes from matter and there's no God. This is why they're suffering. Forgetfulness of God will lead to suffering. And you'll make many mistakes and you engage in sinful activity unknowingly because of this ignorance that's being passed on as if it's science. Okay. So that was the point I wanted to make. That Prabhupada makes it very emphatically. Okay. So now if you say, well, he started the Bhaktivedanta Institute, what are they doing? Not much. That's why you don't hear about them in the newspaper. You ever hear about the Bhaktivedanta Institute? No. No, the devotees have failed. Prabhupada didn't fail. He gave in this one little book, he gives everything. Right? We are not communicating this in a substantive way. That's why you're not hearing about Bhaktivedanta Institute. Haribol, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. If you learn this one book, and it's a short book, you can defeat anybody, even the big scientists, in a debate. Okay, who's going to sing? Sanmukh, you want to sing? Give him the words. Here they are. I keep them all here so I can give them out. But you have to give them back to me. Go ahead.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
ahead.
Bandhu moi savadana mate Bandhu moi savadana mate Krishna Prapti Jahara Prasade Var E Bhava Toriya Jai
Sade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Aikya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Goriya Aya
Arana Kauriyo Mane Asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
Ye Prasade Pure Sarva Asa
Chakshudan Dilo Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Jai
Akshudan Dila Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se
Divya Gyan Hriday Prakasito
Divya Gyani De Prakasito
Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avijna Vinasha Jate
Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avilya Vinasa Jate
Vedega Jahara Charito
Degai Janara Charito
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu
Lokenath Lokera Jivana
Lokenath Lokera Jivana
Aha Prabhu Korodaya Deho More Pada Chaya
Aha Prabhu Korodaya Deho More Pada Chaya
Ibeja Jushuk Tribhuvana
Ebeyas Pusakti Bhuvana
Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana
Prabhupada Patita Pavana
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pashajadistarine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pasyatya Desatarine
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada,
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva. Very good. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvajigachara Statara Satarishi Shishimari's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. You have to keep this still. They're going to recite it in English. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvajigachara Statara Satarishi Shishimari's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vindiji Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapura Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the Samudra, all glories to the Samudra, all glories to the Samudra, all glories to Shiguru and Shiguranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavan Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Buddhi Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharani Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskati Satani. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down this lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my dark eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, friend of the poor, and Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Buddha Smata Bhakti Smata. Namaste Saraswati Devi. Gaura Premanandi, Haribo, Haribo, Haribo. Very good, Samuk. I pray you always make advancement in Krishna.